The morning of April 1st, 2014, began with the kind of vibrant, crystalline sunlight that draws travelers to Panama from all corners of the globe. Buckwheat, a mountain town nestled in the Carriquí Highlands, was waking up to a day that felt full of promise. For Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, two young students from the Netherlands, the day was supposed to be a casual exploration, a brief excursion into the lush cloud forests surrounding the Baru volcano. They had arrived with the intention of volunteering and learning Spanish, fully immersing themselves in the local culture. On this particular Tuesday, their plan was simple. They would hike the Pianista trail, a path named for its resemblance to a piano keyboard in its varying elevations, and return before dinner. They packed light, carrying only a single backpack between them, which contained water, phones, a camera, and their passports. They wore tank tops and shorts, dressed for the heat of the dry season, unaware that the microclimates of the jungle could turn unforgiving in an instant. Witnesses recall seeing the two women that morning, looking cheerful and energetic. They flagged down a taxi and were driven to the trailhead on the outskirts of town. The driver would later recount that nothing seemed amiss. They were just two friends on an adventure, accompanied by a local dog, often seen trailing hikers. A detail that adds a layer of poignancy to the narrative. They stepped off the pavement and onto the dirt path, disappearing into the green embrace of the forest. The trail they chose is well known in the region. It is a steady climb, winding through coffee plantations before entering the dense jungle canopy. For the average hiker, it takes about 3 to 4 hours to reach the summit and return. The path is clearly marked up to the top, known as the Mirador or the Lookout. The digital evidence, recovered much later, allows us to reconstruct their journey with a haunting precision. The photographs taken with their Canon camera depict a serene ascent. The images show blue skies piercing through the foliage, wide smiles, and the verdant beauty of the Panamanian wilderness. They reached the Mirador around 1 in the afternoon. At this elevation on the Continental Divide, one can see both the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea on a clear day. This is the natural turnaround point. The trail officially ends here, marked by a fence and warnings not to proceed without a guide. However, there is a path that continues beyond the summit, descending down the other side of the mountain towards the Caribbean slope. This terrain is vastly different. It is wilder, wetter, and far more treacherous. It is not a loop. It leads deep into the river systems of the interior, an area rarely traversed by casual hikers. For reasons that remain the subject of intense speculation, the two travelers did not turn back at the summit. Perhaps the weather was too inviting, or perhaps they believed the path would loop back to Buckwheat. A photo captured at this juncture shows them looking out over the rugged landscape beyond the divide. It is the last image where their demeanor appears undeniably carefree. They crossed the line, descending into the dense vegetation of the northern slope. The trail here becomes indistinguishable from animal tracks and riverbeds. The topography is deceptive, a labyrinth of ravines and steep inclines that can disorient even experienced outdoorsmen. As the afternoon wore on, the geography began to work against them. The sun, which sets early and rapidly in the tropics, began to dip. The temperature at high altitudes in this region can plummet once the light fades, dropping to levels that are dangerous for those without proper insulation. The light clothing that was appropriate for a sunny midday hike offered no protection against the chilling mist and rain that characterize the cloud forest at night. The first indication that the situation had shifted from a hike to a crisis came late that afternoon. The logs from their mobile phones reveal a chilling timeline. At 4:39 in the afternoon, the first attempt to contact emergency services was made. One of the travelers dialed 112, the international emergency number. The call did not connect. Minutes later, the other phone was used to dial the same number. Again, the network signal was absent. They were in a dead zone, deep within the shadow of the mountains, far from the cellular towers of Buckwheat. These initial calls were brief, suggesting they were moving, perhaps trying to find higher ground to catch a signal. The sun would have been setting, casting long shadows and turning the jungle into a wall of impenetrable darkness. The psychological toll of that first evening is difficult to fathom. The forest, so beautiful in the daylight, transforms into a cacophony of unknown sounds at night. The insects, the wind through the canopy, and the rushing water of the river would have been the only company. Without flashlights, their world would have shrunk to the few feet in front of them. They likely huddled together for warmth, waiting for the sun to rise, hoping that the morning would bring clarity or rescue. Back in town, the silence was noted. The host family, where the women were staying, expected them for dinner. When the night passed without their return, concern began to take root. The following morning, April 2nd, they had an appointment with a local guide for a tour of the area. The guide waited, but they never arrived. This missed appointment was the catalyst that escalated the situation from a mere absence to a missing persons case. The alarm was raised. Local authorities were notified, and the community began to mobilize. But the search area was vast, and the initial assumption was that they might have simply gotten lost on the main trail or decided to stay elsewhere. Deep in the forest, the situation for the two travelers was deteriorating. On the morning of April 2nd, the phone logs show a renewed, frantic effort to connect with the outside world. Between 6 and 7 in the morning, right as the sun would have been illuminating their surroundings. Multiple calls were attempted to 112 and 911. Every single attempt failed. The network bars remained empty. The battery levels were dropping. It appears a decision was made to conserve power. The phones were powered down and only turned on sporadically, likely to check for a signal. This indicates a rational, survivalist mindset. They were managing their resources, trying to outlast the predicament. By the afternoon of April 2nd, they had been in the jungle for over 24 hours without food or shelter. The terrain on the northern slope is unforgiving. It is a landscape of slick mud, steep ravines, and fast-moving river channels known as quebradas. One slip can result in a significant fall or injury. The vegetation is so dense that aerial searches are often futile. A person can be mere yards away from a search party and remain invisible. As the days progressed, the pattern of phone activity changed, offering a grim window into their declining state. On April 3rd, the calls continued but remained unsuccessful. The isolation was absolute. The search and rescue operation in Buckwheat had ramped up significantly, with helicopters, dogs, and local tribespeople scouring the known trails. However, the search initially focused on the Pianista Trail and the immediate area around the summit. There was little reason to suspect they had traveled so far down the dangerous Caribbean side. The travelers were miles away from where anyone was looking. By April 4th, the phone batteries were critically low. The logs show that the phone belonging to Lisanne was completely depleted. The remaining phone belonging to Kris continued to be switched on and off, but the nature of the activity shifted. No longer were they dialing emergency numbers. Instead, the phone was simply checked for signal. This silence speaks volumes. It suggests a realization that help was not a phone call away. Or perhaps that they were conserving every last electron for a moment of hope that never materialized. A perplexing anomaly appears in the data on April 5th. The phone was accessed, but the PIN code was not entered correctly. This occurred multiple times. This detail has fueled endless analysis. Was the owner too weak or disoriented to remember the code? Was someone else trying to use the phone? Or, in a desperate attempt to access the signal strength without unlocking the device, were they simply pressing buttons? The phone was left on for an hour that day, searching for a network that would never reach them, before depletion claimed it as well. During this time, the weather in the region had turned. Heavy rains are common, causing the rivers to swell and the temperatures to drop further. The environment itself became an adversary. The rocks in the riverbeds are smooth and slippery, the currents deceptive. Navigating this landscape without proper gear is nearly impossible for even the most fit individuals. The physical exhaustion, combined with the lack of sustenance and the exposure to the elements, would have been debilitating. More than a week after they vanished, the camera was used again. In the deep of night, on April 8th, a series of 90 flash photos were taken over the course of a few hours. These images are disorienting and difficult to interpret. Most show nothing but darkness, rain, and foliage. Some show rocks and a ravine. One image captures the back of a head, showing distinctive hair. Another shows what appears to be a makeshift signal marker made of paper and twigs on a rock. These photos suggest they were still alive, deep in the ravine, days after the search had begun. The use of the flash might have been an attempt to signal a helicopter they heard overhead, or perhaps to illuminate their surroundings in the pitch black of the jungle night. The tragic conclusion of their journey was not discovered until weeks later. In mid-June, a local indigenous woman found the blue backpack caught on a riverbank, miles downstream from where the hike began. Inside, the electronics were dry and intact, preserved by the bag's material. This discovery shifted the operation from a rescue to a recovery. The subsequent investigation utilized the data from these devices to piece together the timeline of their final days. The evidence suggests that a fatal accident or the sheer brutality of the environment led to the loss of life. Fragmented evidence located later along the riverbank confirmed that the two friends had perished in the wilderness. The incident remains a subject of intense scrutiny, not because of what is known, but because of the gaps in the narrative. The transition from a sunny hike to a desperate struggle for survival happened in the blink of an eye. The decision to walk past the summit, the inability to find a signal, and the long, agonizing wait for a rescue that came too late create a story of profound sorrow. It serves as a stark reminder of the indifference of nature and how quickly the familiar world can vanish, leaving only the wild, the silence, and the mystery of what truly transpired in those final, lonely days in the jungle. The discovery of the blue backpack was the turning point that transformed disappearance into a baffling collection of contradictions. For 10 weeks, the jungle had kept its secrets regarding the fate of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. Then, a local woman tending to her rice paddies along the banks of the Killabur River found the item caught in driftwood. What immediately struck investigators was not just the discovery itself, but the condition of the object. Despite nearly 3 months of exposure to the relentless humidity, flash floods, and rocky terrain of the Panamanian wilderness, the backpack was relatively clean. It was dry. The electronics inside were not waterlogged bricks, but functioning devices that held the only timeline of what happened after the two women walked off the map. This backpack served as the black box of the incident, and its contents birthed the first and most enduring anomaly. How could a fabric bag travel miles down a turbulent river system, allegedly dragged by floodwaters that fracture stone, and arrive in such pristine condition? The sunglasses inside were intact. The bras belonging to the women were packed inside, a detail that confused profilers. Why would they remove undergarments while hiking? Some suggested they were used to filter water, while others viewed it as a sign that the clothing had been gathered by a third party and placed into the bag later. The items were neatly arranged, suggesting a composure that did not match the chaotic environment of a lost hiker. Once the authorities accessed the digital memory of the phones and the camera found within, the timeline fractured into a series of logical impossibilities and haunting behaviors. The mobile phone logs provided a minute-by-minute account of desperation. Yet, they also revealed a discipline that bordered on mechanical. On April 1st, the day the hike began, the logs show that the women dialed emergency numbers 112 and 911 just hours after the last photo was taken at the summit. This indicates that the situation deteriorated rapidly. However, the calls never connected due to a lack of signal. The anomaly here lies in the pattern that followed. For days, the phones were powered on at roughly the same time each morning, used to check for a signal, and then powered off to conserve battery. This demonstrates a clear, rational mind at work, prioritizing survival over panic. They were not running blindly. They were managing their resources. However, the pattern shifted drastically on April 5th. The battery on the device belonging to Lisanne was fully depleted. The device belonging to Kris continued to operate, but a strange behavior emerged. From April 5th onward, the phone was powered on, but the correct PIN code was never entered again. It happened multiple times. Someone was turning on the phone, waiting for it to boot, but unable to unlock it to access the contact list or messages. This leads to two unsettling possibilities. Either Kris was too cognitively impaired to remember a code she used daily, or she was no longer the one holding the phone. The device remained active, searching for a signal without user input, until it finally lost power on April 11th, marking the electronic end of the journey. If the phones told a story of fading hope, the Canon PowerShot camera told a story of sudden, inexplicable activity. The memory card contained a series of standard tourist photographs from April 1st. They show the women smiling, the weather clear, and the view from the Continental Divide breathtaking. Then there is a silence. For 7 days, not a single photo was taken. This gap is reasonable if they were conserving battery or focused on survival. But the silence was broken by a missing piece of data that technical experts call image 509. The camera numbering system is sequential. The last photo on the summit was 508. The next available photo found on the card was 510. File 509 was gone. This deletion is a significant forensic anomaly. On this specific model of camera, if a user deletes a photo in the field, the next picture taken usually overwrites the number or fills the gap. For a file to be completely missing from the sequence usually implies it was deleted on a computer, not the camera itself. If the women deleted a blurry photo, why did the counter skip? If someone else deleted it, why that specific image? Theories abound that image 509 showed something significant, perhaps a person, a landmark, or an injury that contradicted the official narrative of a simple hiking accident. The absence of this single file casts a shadow over the integrity of the entire digital evidence cache. The true descent into the surreal occurred on April 8th. In the middle of the night, deep in the jungle darkness, the camera was reactivated. Over the course of 3 hours, 90 flash photographs were taken. This equates to roughly one photo every 2 minutes. The content of these night photos defies easy explanation. Most show nothing but heavy rain, the flash illuminating millions of water droplets against a black void. Others show unidentifiable foliage, moss-covered rocks, and steep, muddy ravines. The location looks indistinguishable from hundreds of other ravines in the region. Yet, the angle of the shots suggests the photographer was stationary, perhaps looking up or down a steep embankment. Why take 90 photos in the dark? One theory is that they were using the flash as a signaling device, hoping a search plane or a person nearby would see the strobe light. Another theory suggests they were using the flash to see their immediate surroundings, illuminating the darkness for a split second to check for predators or a path. However, 3 specific images from this night session stand out, transforming the anomaly into something deeply unsettling. One photo shows a branch with red plastic bags snagged on the twigs. It appears to be a makeshift marker, perhaps an attempt to signal for help or mark a location. Another image is a close-up of the back of Kris's head. Her strawberry blonde hair is clean, dry, and distinct, which contradicts the environment of heavy rain and days of muddy hiking. Why photograph the back of a companion's head in the middle of a storm? The most disturbing image is one that was never officially released, but leaked in low resolution. It appears to show a steep rock wall or the bottom of a ravine. Some claim to see the perspective of someone lying down looking up, while others see a frantic attempt to document a fall. The erratic nature of these photos, some pointing at the sky, some at the ground, some at nothing, suggests an unraveling of the disciplined survival mode seen in the phone logs. It was a burst of manic activity after a week of silence, and it was the last sign of life the camera ever recorded. As the search shifted from rescue to recovery, the physical evidence found in the months that followed only deepened the mystery. The discovery of denim shorts belonging to one of the women added a layer of confusion. They were found atop a rock on the opposite bank of the river from where the backpack was discovered. The shorts were not torn or ragged, as one might expect from a fall or a struggle through thorns. They were reportedly zipped and folded. This detail is contentious. Why would someone remove their protective clothing in a jungle environment teeming with insects and sharp underbrush? Paradoxical undressing is a known phenomenon in the final stages of hypothermia, where the individual feels an intense, burning heat and strips off their clothes. However, to button and fold the clothing afterward is not consistent with the delirium of hypothermia. It suggests intent. It implies that the clothing was removed while the individual was lucid, or that it was placed there by someone else to be found. The biological evidence recovered alongside these items presented the final scientific anomaly. When fragments were eventually located, the state of decomposition varied wildly between the two individuals. The recovery site was miles away from the initial disappearance zone, suggesting the river had carried them downstream. However, the condition of the recovered elements did not match the timeline of a natural decomposition in a humid rainforest. One set of recovered biological material showed signs of active decomposition consistent with the time past. However, other elements, specifically a portion of the pelvic region, were completely bleached. The whiteness of the material stunned the forensic pathologist. For a biological element to become that bleached usually requires months of exposure to intense sunlight or the presence of chemical accelerants like lime or phosphorus. In the deep canopy of the cloud forest, direct sunlight is scarce. The idea that natural processes could bleach bone-like material to such a pristine white within a few weeks, while other nearby biological matter remained in a state of standard decay, is scientifically difficult to reconcile. It sparked immediate speculation about the use of chemicals to hasten decomposition, a tactic often associated with criminal attempts to destroy evidence. Furthermore, the lack of marks on the recovered elements was unusual. In a river known for dragging heavy stones and debris, one would expect the biological material to show signs of abrasion, fracturing, or animal predation. Instead, the foot found still inside a hiking boot was well preserved, and the bleached element was smooth. There were no signs of the violent trauma one would expect from a fatal fall from a high cliff which was the official explanation for their demise. The official conclusion was that the women fell from a monkey bridge or a steep cliff, succumbed to the elements, and were swept away by the river. Yet the anomalies refused to align with this simple narrative. The dry backpack, the missing file 509, the battery management, followed by the inability to unlock the phone, the frantic night photos, the folded shorts, and the chemically bleached evidence create a constellation of facts that do not form a clear picture. Each anomaly serves as a loose thread. When pulled, it does not unravel the mystery, but rather tightens the knot. The data indicates two people who were smart, careful, and fighting for survival. Yet the physical evidence suggests a scenario that is either impossibly chaotic or chillingly staged. The jungle consumed the truth, leaving behind only these discordant puzzle pieces that fit together in no logical way, ensuring that the story of the lost hikers remains a permanent shadow over the beauty of the Pianista Trail. The dense canopy of the Panamanian cloud forest does not give up its secrets easily. For weeks after Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon vanished from the Pianista Trail, the jungle offered nothing but silence. Search parties, helicopters, and desperate families scoured the terrain. But the vibrant green landscape had seemingly swallowed the two Dutch students whole. It was not until 10 weeks later that the silence broke, not with a shout, but with a blue backpack found resting on a rock by the banks of the Culebra River. This discovery marked the beginning of the end of the search. Yet it also opened the door to a labyrinth of forensic anomalies that remain unsolved to this day. This phase of the mystery represents the dead ends, the points where logic fractures and the evidence points in two contradictory directions simultaneously. The discovery of the backpack itself presented the first contradiction, found by a local indigenous woman in a rice paddy along the riverbank. The bag was miles away from where the women were last seen. Logic would dictate that an object exposed to the harsh environment of a tropical rainforest for over 2 months would be degraded, waterlogged, or filthy. However, the backpack was reported to be in surprisingly good condition. The electronics inside, including 2 mobile phones and a digital camera, were dry and functional. The brassieres belonging to the women were also found inside, folded. This detail has puzzled investigators for years. Why would they remove their undergarments? Some theories suggest they were used to filter water or mark a trail, while others suggest a rise in body temperature due to hypothermia. But the neatness of the packing implies a lucid state of mind, at least at the time those items were stowed. The digital footprints extracted from the recovered phones provided a harrowing timeline of the days following their disappearance on April 1st. The logs revealed that the first attempt to contact emergency services occurred just hours after they began their hike. Both phones dialed 112 and 911. The calls never connected. The dense topography of the Continental Divide blocked the signal, leaving them isolated. Over the next few days, the pattern of phone activity painted a portrait of rational desperation. They turned the phones on only to check for signal, then turned them off to conserve battery. This discipline suggests they were not panicked to the point of irrationality, but were managing their resources, waiting for a rescue that never came. By April 5th, the pattern shifted. The battery in one phone was depleted. The other phone continued to be powered on intermittently, but without the correct PIN code being entered. This detail has sparked intense debate. Did the owner of the phone become too weak to remember the code? Or was someone else trying to access the device? The final signal check occurred on April 11th. After that, the digital silence was absolute. The timeline derived from the phones aligns with a survival scenario. Yet, it does not explain why they could not retrace their steps, or why they ventured so far into the dangerous terrain on the other side of the divide. If the phone logs were a testament to fading hope, the digital camera offered a glimpse into a descent into darkness. The memory card contained a series of standard tourist photos from April 1st. They show the women smiling, looking out over the scenic vistas of the divide. The weather is clear, their demeanor bright. Then there is a week of nothing. No photos were taken while they were presumably lost and making those desperate emergency calls. The camera remained dormant until the night of April 8th. In the middle of the night, between 1 and 4 in the morning, the camera was used to take 90 photos in rapid succession. Most of these images show nothing but near total darkness, likely accidental triggers or attempts to use the flash as a light source. However, a few of the images reveal disquieting details. There are photos of the jungle floor, wet and glistening with rain. There are images of heavy undergrowth and a steep, muddy ravine. One photo captures a makeshift marker made of twigs and red plastic bags, perhaps an attempt to signal helicopters overhead. Another image, perhaps the most unsettling of all, shows the back of a head with distinct strawberry blonde hair, matted and wet. The location of these night photos has never been definitively identified, though the topography suggests they were near a riverbed, deep within the serpent-like winding of the river system. The chaotic nature of these night photos contrasts sharply with the disciplined battery management of the phones. Was this a moment of panic? Were they hearing search parties nearby and trying to signal them with the camera flash? Or was this the documentation of a final, tragic deterioration? The timestamps show the photos were taken deep in the night, in pitch blackness, during a heavy rainstorm. The psychological state required to document such an environment is difficult to fathom. Amidst the recovered data, a technical anomaly emerged that has become a focal point for skepticism regarding the official narrative. Photo 509 is missing. The numbering sequence on the camera skips from 508 to 510. Digital forensic experts differ on the cause. Some argue that if a photo is deleted from the camera, the numbering does not skip. It simply overwrites or leaves a gap that can be retrieved. A skip suggests a specific type of deletion via a computer or a malfunction that occurred at a critical moment. The absence of this single image, which would have been taken between the last daytime photo and the first desperate night photo, represents a void where vital context should be. It is a literal missing link in the visual chain of custody. 2 months after the backpack was found, the search yielded physical evidence that was far more grim. Indigenous guides and search teams located fragments of the individuals scattered along the riverbank. The distribution of this evidence was perplexing. Items were found miles apart, separated by swift currents and rocky terrain. The most significant find was a hiking boot, still laced, containing a foot. DNA testing confirmed the identity. Later, a pelvic bone was recovered. The condition of the biological evidence raised difficult questions for the forensic pathologists involved. The pelvic bone was described as being completely bleached, devoid of organic matter. In a tropical environment, decomposition is rapid, but the state of this specific bone was unusual. Some experts noted that natural decomposition in a river environment could strip a bone clean, but the whiteness of the bone led to speculation about chemical exposure. Conversely, other fragments found nearby showed different stages of decay. This inconsistency fuels the argument that the scene may have been manipulated, or that the environmental factors acting on the scattered evidence varied wildly. The official conclusion reached by Panamanian authorities was that the women succumbed to a tragic accident. The theory posits that they got lost, wandered onto the indigenous trails on the far side of the divide, and eventually suffered a fall, perhaps into the river or a ravine, leading to their demise. The night photos are interpreted as their final location before rising water levels or injuries made movement impossible. The scattering of the evidence is attributed to the rising and falling of the river levels, which would have carried items downstream and dispersed them over the weeks. However, this conclusion leaves numerous loose ends dangling. The dry backpack remains the most stubborn anomaly. If the women were swept away by a river or caught in the deluge depicted in the night photos, how did the bag remain dry and elevated on a rock? If they fell from a height, why were the phones not damaged? if the area was so inaccessible, how did the backpack end up in a location where it would be easily found by a local, weeks after the area had arguably been searched? Furthermore, the geography itself presents a challenge. The Pianista Trail is a singular path. To get lost requires leaving the path and venturing into the dense, unforgiving bush. While possible, experienced hikers usually attempt to backtrack. The phone logs show they were mobile for days. Why did they not find their way back to the summit, which was the highest point and the only place with a reliable cell signal? Instead, they seemingly went deeper into the watershed, away from civilization. The concept of a third-party involvement has been dismissed by officials, but remains a persistent undercurrent in independent investigations. The missing photo, the dry bag, and the odd state of the skeletal fragments provide enough ambiguity to support alternative narratives. Yet there is no physical evidence of another person in the photos. No foreign DNA reported on the backpack, and no witnesses to an interaction on the trail. The jungle is a place where evidence rots, and the humidity erodes certainty. We are left with a collection of puzzle pieces that belong to different pictures. We have the picture of a hiking accident, supported by the geography and the phone logs. We have the picture of something more anomalous, supported by the dry bag and the missing photo. And we have the picture of a chaotic, terrifying struggle against the elements, supported by the night photos. These threads do not tie together into a neat knot. They end abruptly, frayed and disconnected. The case of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon is often cited as a cautionary tale about the dangers of the wild. But it is also a testament to the limits of forensic science when pitted against the chaotic forces of nature. The jungle recycles life with efficient brutality. What was found offers only a fragmented glimpse of their final days, the true sequence of events, the conversations they had as the battery bars dipped lower, the reason for the night photos, and the explanation for the pristine backpack are answers that likely dissolved into the mist of the cloud forest years ago. The dead ends are not just in the investigation. They are in the very trail they walked, leading to a silence that no amount of analysis has been able to break. The story stops, but the unsettling quiet continues. Deep within the dense, verdant expanse of the Talamanca mountain range in Panama, nature usually overwhelms technology. The humidity corrodes circuits, the canopy blocks satellite connections, and the silence swallows electronic noise. However, inside a blue backpack discovered by a local woman near the banks of a river, 2 devices lay protected from the elements. These were an iPhone 4 and a Samsung Galaxy S3. They belonged to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. When forensic examiners finally powered these devices on, They did not just find a collection of vacation photographs or saved messages. They found a timeline of survival, a digital heartbeat that continued to pulse long after the two women had vanished from the known world. The analysis of the phone logs creates a narrative that is both rigorously factual and deeply unsettling, revealing a week-long struggle against isolation, where the only lifeline was a fluctuating bar of signal that never quite reached home. To understand the weight of this evidence, one must look beyond the devices as mere telephones. In the context of a disappearance, a smartphone becomes a black box. It records user intent, location data, battery life, and the desperate, repetitive attempts to communicate with the outside world. The logs recovered from the phones of Kris and Lisanne provide the most concrete facts in a case otherwise defined by speculation and ambiguity. They tell us exactly when the hike turned from a leisure activity into an emergency situation. The journey began on April 1st. The early photos from that day show clear skies and smiling faces at the summit of the Pianista trail. The metadata on these images indicates a normal pace. However, the tone of the digital footprint shifts abruptly in the late afternoon. At 4:39 in the afternoon on April 1st, the first emergency call was attempted from the iPhone. It was a dial to 112, the international emergency number. Just 12 minutes later, at 4:51, the Samsung attempted to call the same number. Both calls failed. The dense jungle canopy and the uneven topography of the Continental Divide blocked the line of sight to the nearest cell towers in Buckwheat. This initial synchronization is telling. It suggests that shortly after reaching the summit and proceeding beyond it, something happened that caused immediate concern. It was not a panic-induced frenzy of dialing, but a coordinated effort. One phone was tried, and when it failed, the other was used. The sun sets quickly in the tropics, and by 6 in the evening, the jungle floor is plunged into absolute darkness. No further calls were made that first night. The phones were turned off. This detail alone speaks volumes about the mindset of the women. They were preserving battery life. They were planning for the next day. It implies a rational decision-making process, a hope that morning would bring better light or a higher vantage point. On the morning of April 2nd, the pattern resumed. The logs show that at 6:58 in the morning, the Samsung was powered on and attempted to dial 112. It failed. Then a shift in strategy occurred. At 8:14 in the morning, the iPhone attempted to dial 911, the emergency number for Panama. This indicates they realized the international code was not connecting and tried the local equivalent. This call also failed. Throughout the second day, the devices recorded multiple attempts to connect to a network. between 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Both phones were used to check for signal. What makes this data so poignant is the specific nature of the reception in that area. Network engineers explain that in mountainous terrain, signal is not a uniform blanket. It reflects bounces and fades. A user might have 0 bars standing in one spot, but moving 10 feet to the left could theoretically catch a ghost of a signal from a distant tower. The logs suggest the women were moving, checking, and turning the phones off again to conserve power. At one point on April 2nd, the iPhone logs show a connection to a cell tower lasting just a few seconds. It was a digital handshake, a brief acknowledgement between the device and the network, but it was too weak to transmit voice or data. It was a tantalizing flicker of hope that vanished as quickly as it appeared. By April 3rd, the situation had evolved. The logs show a dedicated discipline regarding battery conservation. The iPhone was powered on multiple times, but only for short durations to check for signal bars. There were no frantic repeated dials, just a methodical search for reception. The analysis of the Samsung reveals a similar pattern. However, the batteries were draining. The Samsung, an older model, was losing power faster. By the afternoon of April 3rd, the activity on the Samsung began to decrease significantly. The narrative took a strange and baffling turn on April 5th. By this point, the Samsung's battery was completely depleted. The iPhone became the sole link to the electronic world. The forensic report notes that the iPhone was powered on, but a specific anomaly appeared in the logs. From this date forward, the correct PIN code was never entered again. The phone was turned on, and the user navigated to the signal check screen without unlocking the main interface, or they attempted to enter the code and failed. This detail has sparked endless debate among investigators and independent researchers. There are several interpretations, all of them tragic. One possibility is that the effects of the environment, including dehydration and exhaustion, had impaired cognitive function to the point where the code was forgotten. Another possibility is that one of the women was no longer able to operate the phone, and the other did not know the code. Simply turning it on to check the signal bars in the notification area. The logs show that the phone was left on for varying intervals, sometimes just enough to scan for a network, other times lingering for 15 minutes as if waiting for a miracle. Between April 7th and April 10th, the pattern became sporadic. The investigative report details 77 separate instances where the iPhone was powered on during this period. However, in these instances, the phone was not used to dial. It was simply woken up. The screen would illuminate the darkness of the jungle. The signal bars would likely show no service. And then it would be powered down or allowed to sleep. This ritual of checking the phone suggests a persistent, enduring hope. Even a week into their ordeal, they had not given up on the idea that the device in their pocket could save them. The final gasps of the iPhone occurred on April 11th. The device was turned on at 10:51 in the morning. Unlike the previous disciplined checks that lasted only minutes, this time the phone remained on. It stayed active for 1 hour and 5 minutes. It is impossible to know who was holding it or what they were thinking during that hour. Was it left on intentionally to act as a beacon? Was it a final attempt to keep the device ready in case a search helicopter flew overhead? Or was it simply that the energy required to manage the device had finally run out? The battery level dropped critically low. At 11:56 in the morning, the iPhone switched off for the last time. The digital timeline ends there. The silence that followed the 11th of April is heavy. The data extracted from these phones provides a skeletal structure to the week that Kris and Lisanne spent lost in the wilderness. It counters the idea of an immediate fatal incident. It proves survival. It proves that for days they were lucid, mobile enough to check for reception, and strategic enough to conserve their resources. The technological evidence paints a picture of two young women who were waiting for a signal that the geography of the Cordillera simply refused to grant them. This digital testimony is devoid of emotion, yet it is arguably the most emotive part of the entire investigation. We are used to technology working. We are accustomed to the instant gratification of a connected call or a sent message. To see the logs of failure, the call dropped, the network unavailable, the incorrect PIN, is to witness the slow, agonizing dismantling of modern safety nets. The phones, usually tools of convenience, became useless artifacts in the face of the primal density of the forest. The lingering signal, or rather the lack thereof, defines the tragedy. The proximity to safety was deceptive. Buckwheat was not hundreds of miles away. It was relatively close as the crow flies, yet electronically, they were in a void. The signal logs serve as a haunting diary. They do not tell us what the women said to each other, or how they spent those long, dark nights, but they tell us that they were there, fighting for connection, until the very last milliampere of energy was gone. The backpack, when found, protected these truths, delivering the final, silent message of Kris and Lisanne to the world. They had tried again and again to reach out,